Good evening, class. This is Mrs. Pender Harrison, and tonight you're going to be taking notes on literary devices. If you are looking at the title of this video and seeing that it says Literary Devices Part 2 and panicking, please don't. It may be that your class is taking notes on these particular literary devices in the Part 2 video. There are many different types of literary devices, and that list was just too long to cover in one set of notes. So if you have been assigned this video, you're in the right place, you're watching the right video, and you'll probably take the literary devices part 1 video notes sometime next week. Go ahead and pause the video and set up your notes in Cornell style. Your essential question goes at the very top, and it is how do authors use literary devices to convey their meaning? Let's begin. Our first literary device that I'd like you to take notes on is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is the use of indicative words or phrases and hints that set the stage for a story to unfold. It gives the reader a hint of something that is going to happen without revealing the story or spoiling the suspense. Foreshadowing might come at the beginning of a story when the main character is reflecting and thinking, it all started back in 2nd grade. Nothing would ever be the same ever again. And then the scene cuts to 1st grade or something like that. It's a hint that the author or the speaker gives to the reader that something important is going to happen. Irony.
Mr. Artist and Mr. Gonzalez, please come to the counseling conference room. Mr. Artist and Mr. Gonzalez to the counseling conference room.
Irony refers to a mismatch or a tension in the text. Now, it could be a number of different types of mismatches. The first one is a mismatch between what's said and what is meant. The second is a mismatch between what the audience knows and what the character knows. And the last mismatch is a mismatch between expectations and actual reality. Irony is not just a simple coincidence, and it's often misused. Irony. A diabetic gets hit and killed by a truck delivering insulin to the hospital. What's not ironic is if I order the same meal for lunch as my friend did without even knowing what he ordered. That's just called a coincidence. It's just something that happened. There are 3 different types of irony. The first one is verbal. This is when a person says one thing but means another. So for example, I'd love to go to prom chaperoned by my embarrassing aunties. Or even sarcasm. My weekend was great. My dog got hit by a car. Sarcasm is a form of verbal irony, but it's not the only type of irony. The second type of irony is situational. This is when there is a contradiction between what we expect to happen and what actually happens. For example, a fireman who burns down the forest by playing with matches during his break. We would expect for the firefighter to know better than to play with matches in a forest. The last type of irony is dramatic irony. This is often seen in plays, which is where we get the term dramatic from drama. The audience or the reader knows something important, but the character does not know that piece of information. It's used a lot in scary movies when we see our main character washing dishes at the sink and a shadowy figure crosses the hall behind her. The audience in The Lion King knows that Scar killed Mufasa, but Simba in his pride believe that he is responsible and turn to Scar for leadership. Or in Othello, the audience knows that Iago is plotting for Othello's downfall, but Othello and Desdemona are unaware of his plans until it is too late. When looking for irony, you want to look for mismatches. Consider whether and to what extent the author might be using irony. If a character is speaking about a situation in a way that's different than you would expect, it might be verbal irony. If the audience knows something that a character does not know, it might be dramatic irony. And if someone or something seems to be behaving or causing results in an unexpected or illogical way, it might be situational irony. The third literary device that I want to talk to you about today is characterization. A character is a person or animal who takes part in a story. There are different types of characters. The one that I want you to take notes on right now is the protagonist. This is the main character of a narrative, the central character who engages the reader's interest and often their empathy. So, for example, who's the protagonist of Shrek? Might be a question you write over on the left-hand side. The antagonist is the character, the force, or the collection of forces that opposes the protagonist and gives rise to the conflict. The antagonist is the opponent of the protagonist. So who is the antagonist in Shrek? A dynamic character is a character that changes over the course of the story. They've learned, they've grown, they've adapted, they've survived. Somehow they have changed from the beginning to the end. This could be their personality and their values, their outlook on life. A static character, however, is a character that does not change over the course of the story. We see static characters most often in children's stories or simple allegorical fables, the tortoise and the hare, something like that. A flat character is a character who's portrayed with very few traits, and the reader really only knows one or two things about them. Audiences generally do not tend to identify with flat characters, which is why they're often portrayed as villains. Somebody like Lex Luthor or Doc Ock in Spider-Man. A round character, however, is a character that's portrayed with many different character traits, more like a real person. Audiences tend to like round characters because they understand their motivations. And in more recent film, especially in superheroes, sometimes our villains start becoming round characters. There's a whole fan base of people who love Loki from Thor because he is a round character and not a flat character, maybe like in the more traditional comic book story. The protagonist is almost always a round character. Characterization is the process of revealing the character. What kind of person is the character? How do we know? Direct characterization is when the author is directly telling the readers about the character. The author might say something like, he was tall, he was funny, and he wasn't very good at sports, something like that. Indirect characterization is when the author shows the audience things that reveal something about the character. This can be done through the character's speech, their thoughts, their relationship with other characters, their actions, or their looks or appearance. When you're looking for quotes to interpret in an essay, indirect characterization is a better quote to look for because it allows you to do some interpreting or some explanation versus direct characterization, which is really just sort of, he's tall or he's funny. There's not a lot to do with that. The last literary device that we're going to talk about this evening is imagery. Imagery is not just information about our sight, but imagery is sensory details that appeal to our sight, our smell, our taste, our touch, and sound. These are the details in a story that paint a picture in our mind. Colors, shapes, patterns, size, odors, and fragrances, sour, sweet, bitter, salty, textures, movement, temperature, silence, noise, and music. Imagery is when a writer attempts to describe something so that it appeals to our senses. Often imagery is built into other literary devices, like a simile or a metaphor, so the author will use comparisons to appeal to our senses. That's all we have for this evening.